How do you define engineering leadership?
You have to have a good understanding of the subject, number one.
It starts with someone like myself coming up with a pipe dream.
You have to be able to articulate the vision to the team so that they all buy in, they can understand where their piece fits in.
Inevitably, if you think about the management of engineers, the management of technical people, it usually comes out of the ranks of those folks who moved up within that technical division, right? It makes sense that the director or manager of any department or division of a company, if that were a technical division and it had a lot of engineers in it, right? It would make sense that the person that manages those people understand engineering, right? Okay. But at the same time, if an engineer is so good that they sort of move to the top of the pack, it might not necessarily always be so that they move to the top of the pack because they're excellent at managing. Although that could be the case as well, right? But just as there are best practices to engineering, there are also best practices to managing, because it's not just about administrative. Oftentimes when we think of management, people are really not thinking of what the word management means. They're really thinking of administration, just the logistical things, right? But management is not just organization and coordination of people, it's also towards goals. It has to do with motivation, right? It has to do with people's performance levels and productivity. And there's best practices within how to do that with people, as well as there are best practices of engineering.
Can you tell us in a nutshell, what is the Google approach?
So first, let me set up the problem. The challenge for Google is that it has a very engineering-driven culture, very much in the spirit of analytical reasoning, get the data, make sure the evidence is there. Much of it was based on a disdain or dislike of management. So the nature of the change process was, how do we convince our engineers that management matters? And what Google did was took a data-driven approach. They used the same kind of reasoning that engineers use, but they applied it to human resources rather than to product design.
I have an example from a consulting job that I did for a manufacturing company, and they were a supplier, a single point supplier, and they were the only supplier for their client, and so they had a unique relationship where any change that they implemented, they had to share the profits or the benefit of that change with their customer. And so when I went in and worked with them to improve their manufacturing line, we had to phrase it in such a way that the improvement was consistent with what their customer wanted to see, and in a way that the profit sharing was beneficial to both of them. So we looked at certain types of improvements that would benefit them over benefiting both customers, and how that played in. So the organizational structure was a huge part of that decision in how we presented the improvements in the manufacturing line. So it wasn't just about the flow in the line, it was about how that fit with the structure of the organization. So I think as engineers, it's important that we study this so that we can effectively implement any changes that we find and improve upon.